welcome. Welcome to the live session. We're really excited to have a live session with these two brilliant women today. So just get settled. Please, if you're comfortable, add your pronouns to your name. You can do that by clicking participants and then clicking on your name and going to more. That's something we like to do here. But we're here to have a great discussion. So come on, get settled. Introduce yourself in the chat too. We'll watch for more folks who will be joining us throughout the session as that keynote is wrapping up. So anyone attend any sessions earlier? Want to attend a meetup or the keynote? I want to encourage that chat box. Yes. Awesome. Folks are still trickling in. Here they come. And Keri, where are you broadcasting from today?
I am in New Jersey in the US.
Wow. Awesome. I love the setup. I feel like you have interior design goals.
Well, actually, I'm getting it redone. This has been the basic for a while, but I want something a lot nicer. I live by the beach. So working on that, need to put the new desk together myself. So that will be an interesting project in and of itself.
Sounds like an adventure.
Yes.
How about you, Megan? Where are you broadcasting from?
So I'm in the Austin design office, the USAA Austin design office downtown.
Wow.
So you might see people walking behind me. I tried to pick a part of the floor that was a little bit more empty, but there might be somebody that passes by. There's a few of us here.
Really, it's looking like one of those Zoom backgrounds that everyone's been using over the last year, like the office background.
It does.
But it's real. It's beautiful.
Cool. Yeah, they brought cookies this morning. That's really what you need to get me in the office, is just to say we have brought food. So last week they brought tacos. This week there were cookies. I'm going to start expecting this every week. Just note for everyone who's in the Austin office on this call.
I mean, in Austin too. How can you not bribe everybody with tacos? Come on.
I know.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm here from LA. It's summer all year long, and really awesome that we could all be here virtually at the first Women in Voice Summit ever. So thank you both for being here and for leading this panel today. There's other cities in Texas that have better tacos. Okay, well, spill the beans.
Wow, Brian.
Tell me. I need to get out of here. I need to vacate. We have good tacos in LA too, though. So anyway, great. So folks are going to keep trickling in, but I think we can get our party started, and people can just join when they're ready to. So I'm just thrilled to welcome you all to this session. Our goal today is to bring people together with different perspectives on innovation and voice across industries. And so I'm here with our fabulous panelists. We have Megan Hopkins. She's a conversational design director at USAA. They're doing incredible work that we're really excited for her to share more about today. And we have Keri Roberts, who is the North American lead brand evangelist at ReadSpeaker AI. I would like you both to kind of just have an opportunity to share a little more about yourself. We've been learning that intros are dead, so it's really more exciting for everybody to hear from you. Like, what do you do? What do you love about being in voice? So Keri, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, so I think like most, I have kind of a non-linear background into voice. I'm a dancer. I started in the dance and health and fitness space. I owned a dance studio. I was in podcasting, and now in the branding and marketing space in voice for the last few years. So I love how voice connects us to the people and the things that we need and want most, and also how it's able to scale and make things more efficient. So it's exciting to be a part of a space where there's so many creatives and such a variety of people. And I think that's a huge part of what excites me about voice as a whole.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's been one of my favorite parts of this conference, is like hearing everyone's journeys into voice and all the intersections we have in our community. So dance, I want to hear more about that later too. And Megan, how about you? Would you share a little bit more about what you do, what you love about voice?
All right. Well, if we're going all the way back to where we started, I actually aspired to be a Disney animator at some point, but luckily, I think it's actually worked out for the better where I've ended up. But my career kind of moved through user experience and then mobile design and then, multi-touch and multimodal and have kind of wound up where I am. And I want to say it was on purpose, but a lot of it feels like very fortuitous happenstance, we'll say that. But really enjoying the space. I think the thing that I'm most excited about, and it's something that a lot of folks at USAA are getting to start participating in, is we are just on the cusp of building this stuff out, this what we want to be in our big kid voice, what we want to grow up to be in our experiences. And it's very exciting from that standpoint. It's just we're on the brink of a very exciting change in our industry. And it's just, sometimes the possibilities can be overwhelming, but at the same time, it's just that definitely wakes me up in the morning as well.
Inspiring. I mean, yeah, it's really cool to hear all the layers that you've worked through on your journey into conversation design too. So I mean, I really want to dive in a little bit, just one more layer of personality. So for Megan, my question for you is, what was the Disney animation that made you want to be an animator?
Oh man, probably, I'm going to date myself, Fantasia. I'm slightly old. But I mean, so many, it actually, the second I started college, so I trained my entire youth, quote unquote, to be this animator, is when 3D animation actually became a big thing and 2D started kind of dialing down. And it made me think, well, I want to actually earn a living at some point when I graduate college. So maybe I'll change my aspirations. And that's how I ended up here.
Yep, that's a familiar story that many many understand. And Keri, I did want to ask about the dance, because when else are we going to talk about this? What kind of dance did you do?
So I have a degree in dance. So the degree in dance is in modern dance. But as a kid, I competed in ballet, tap, jazz, hip hop, everything.
Wow.
Nowadays, I do a lot more Latin, so salsa, bachata, a little bit of ballroom. So I just always feel, the ability to express yourself and your emotion through movement is universal. You don't have to speak the same language, and there's a level of connection that I've always felt really deeply to myself with dance and also with others. So it's a form of communication, and so it extends into a lot of other ways as well.
That's so interesting that both of you have such an artistic background. And I really do think that that's a really cool layer that a lot of folks can relate to. And what I'm also seeing is that both of you have really invested in everything that you've been passionate about. And I feel like there's some translatable lessons in there for our community about really invest in what you love, and that will offer you some kind of training that will serve you as you pivot in your career.
Yeah.
So back to the present day, I would also love for you to both kind of share a little bit more about what does your company do? What are some of the projects that you're excited to talk about today?
Sure, I can jump in. So I work at USAA. It is a massive company. I'm just going to quote a figure, so around 30,000 people, but it's a global entity, primarily in the United States, but our members are everywhere because we serve the military and we have many active duty folks that we work with. And it's not just kind of one industry, it's actually USAA is kind of several industries kind of put together in a box. We've got, there's banking, there's insurance, so there's kind of that property and casualty. There's also life insurance. So there's many different layers of the interactions we're having with members at any one time. Some folks just have a member account with us, and that's fine. Some folks have literally every product they use is with us, and we definitely appreciate those folks. And we also have what we're, I think, most well known for, and it's kind of what's driving our high standards for some of our conversational work we're starting to do now, is our membership relations folks. So that very personal touch is something that we're known for, and it's been a big driver for us to kind of accentuate that experience, but not take away from what people really love about us. So it's many spaces, many different types of messages, many different types of people, but all kind of one place, one name.
Yeah, and I'm wondering how other companies or other folks in our audience can relate to, hey, this has been a theme that I've seen come up often in Q&As. Our chatbots, our assistants, our voice assistants, what is the relationship there? I've seen people ask, are people going to be replaced, like in these different industries in our sessions? So I think that's a really exciting challenge that y'all are embarking on with your reputation for that customer service, and how to kind of combine them together. I don't know if you have any comments on that right now, but I thought I would just mention that and tie it into what I've seen people asking about.
Yeah, I think we've actually got some USAA people on the line. So if they want to leave comments about how they feel, that's totally fine. Or best taco places, that's okay too.
Tacos, yeah.
It's been an interesting space. I specifically work in what is the design org. We are continually interfacing with the line. We call them the lines of business, but that's our insurance folks and our partners in banks. So there's a lot of communication that has to stretch across not just technological bounds, but also, financial bounds, like how we're financing these things, where it makes the most sense to drive. Because really, when you look at how big this space is, you can say, well, everything's important. Building up technology everywhere we should be doing it, and it can get very overwhelming. And really designs focus. And I think this is why I appreciate the design org so very much at the company I work at. Not to brag too much, I'm sorry, but I'm going to do it. It is because they are so dialed into our membership, that end user, like our MSRs are. Those are our relationship folks. And it helps us focus the work and say, okay, like, yes, we can take technology anywhere, and we can, let's say we make the biggest, most fantastic AI that just reads minds or whatever. Is that really what folks need? Like, is that what they're actually asking us for? And constantly kind of bringing the conversations back to that has been, I think, a pleasure on my part in the design org, but it's also a big driver for our passion.
Yep, love that focus on the users. Always love that focus. Yeah, thanks, Megan. And Keri, for you, would you like to tell us more about ReadSpeaker and your work there?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about it in a little bit of a different way. So there is a psychologist, Albert Moravian, and he studied communication, just regular language in human beings. And he had this study where he found that when you are talking to someone, that body language is about 55% of what's being said. And then tone of voice is about 38%. And then what you actually say is 7%. And as I kind of looked at that research, I started thinking about, well, how does this relate to voice technology? And what if we didn't have something that was multimodal? If we just had something that was auditory based? Well, we could maybe assume that maybe now 93% of what is being said is how it's being said, the tone. And so I like to say, if we use a simple word like hello, if I say hello with excitement, that's going to give you a certain feeling, versus if I say hello, like I'm annoyed, or maybe if I say hello, maybe a little bit more shy, right? It's the same word, but there's a different tone, there's a different emotion. And so at ReadSpeaker AI, that's what we focus on. We are a text-to-speech company. We create custom and branded voices. And so in terms of conversational AI, I like to say we're the cherry on top. So if you have an ice cream sundae, right, what makes it kind of extra special is that cherry on top, is that voice. So you can do great conversation design and be able to have something that can hear you and understand you, but you want to have a voice that comes back that not only represents you, but that has emotions and that has feeling and can be a certain gender or can be a certain dialect or different language. And that's what we build, and that's what we focus on.
Wow, that is so incredible. Both of your work. I really appreciate your sharing that with us, kind of help everyone who, may be familiar with one, but not both of you, to just take us behind the scenes a little bit. So we have quite a few questions to get through today. So we're going to keep diving in, and I want to, remind folks, the chat box is here for you. You can interact with us at any time in the chat box. You can enter your questions in, and we will get to the questions at the end. So yeah, so I want to ask each of you, what are some of the most rewarding parts of working in voice? And I know you both have kind of alluded to this, but if there's anything else you'd like to add, what's been rewarding for you about working in voice?
Yeah, I can start. I think just as a whole, I think what's been really interesting about this space, as Megan and I shared earlier, most people didn't start in this because it didn't exist, or they weren't a technical person. And so if you are an artist or a creative of any kind, and if you grew up in a time where it was about STEM and now it's about STEAM, in public schools where art was kind of to the side and it was about science and technology, we're now seeing this blend of the creatives and the technical people. And that you can't really have one without the other in voice, because as I mentioned, it's so much about the human language. So I really love that there's so many creatives in this space and people thinking outside of the box. And that just creates a more robust space and vertical. So that is what really excites me overall about the voice technology space.
Yeah, totally agree. The newness and openness of it really does have kind of this great quality, and that, we're not a space of necessarily like 20-year practitioners or gurus per se. It's really open for anyone to join, first off. But secondly, as part of that, this space is inspiring to me because it's opening up a lot more pathways when we talk about accessibility and interaction. And, there's still a long way to go with that, but this feels like a really great start to opening up, digital interactions, communication in ways that people weren't able to utilize before. Accessibility has been a big driver throughout my career, from, UI space to mobile space, and now to the voice space, and how we can make our experiences more universal for folks, how we can start reaching out a little bit better, or offering someone maybe a channel that they would feel more comfortable in. So I think that's a great part of this as well. And we think, even in considering things like the smart speakers, and most people generally use those to kind of turn their lights on and off or do something very basic. But what they found out in some of the research is that folks were having kind of heart-to-heart serious conversations with, their Alexa, or they were admitting that they were struggling emotionally. So there's room there to create this outlet to make the space a little bit safer for people to speak up for themselves, or maybe manage their healthcare a little bit better, or, for us, be more financially independent and secure. So I think that's definitely the big inspiration for me, is like, there's so many things we could do to bring more people in with this.
Absolutely. Love hearing about that and seeing the ways that, this kind of leads into the next question. That really surprised me that people are able to open up in a different way to these speakers and these smart speakers and access a different level of care. For each of you, what aspects of working in voice have really surprised you? And you can take the surprise in whatever connotation you'd like.
That's it. I know I got these questions beforehand, but this is always a tough one because it's like everything, the world. I would say what has surprised me the most is every time, and this happens in the speaking voice space especially, but also in text and type and touch, you never know what someone is going to write or say. There are so many ways that someone can approach like a simple statement, even ordering a pizza. And you can take a lot of guesses and assumptions about best practices and where to take that and where it can go. But at the end of the day, because the words are the interface and the interface is so open, folks they think of things that I would just genuinely have never considered. And it's really been a delight, but also a driver to like re-examine how we're approaching building out some of these experiences, because there are so many ways folks use language. For us, it's going to be a lot of boring insurance terminology sometimes, but the way our members say it is totally different. So if you're wanting to quote unquote pause your insurance on our side, that's what we would say. They say, I want to garage my car. And it's been very interesting to see the changes in the uses of language when they interact with us.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Megan. I think, you can ask someone, to check your balance, and there could be thousands of ways somebody would ask that, which is kind of different, again, from other elements of technology. So I think that's interesting. I think surprising also is that when I first heard about voice, the way sometimes people spoke about it was all these things you could do. and how easy it was. And you realize like, okay, that they're kind of talking a little bit more into the future, that there's a lot of stuff we can do now, but there are a lot of moving parts. And there are certain companies that focus on certain pieces and how we have to work together. But in the end, you can create something really beautiful. And so I think it's just realizing like there's a lot that can be done. There's a lot that will continue to grow, but it does take some time, take some trial and error, and it does take being able to work with a variety of people or organizations potentially.
Yes, yes. And I think that does kind of lead into the next question, which is about challenges. So what is one key challenge that you or your team has overcome to innovate or to cross the finish line for a product? Yeah, let us behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah, I can start with that one. So for us, again, we're a text to speech company, and text to speech in the beginning was very much about it just being accurate, having a reading style, having a good sounding voice. But with the adoption of smart speakers, smart devices, conversational AI, we had to think about how do we change this? It has to have emotion. It has to be able to converse. There has to be more moving elements with it. It has to be more human-like, even though it is still a synthetic voice. And so that was a challenge to kind of go back to our research team and go back and we've been doing that for the last few years and continue to do that. How do we make this feel much more dynamic than maybe it was, 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, I would say that the challenge, and I kind of alluded to this in the beginning, because we're several types of businesses, different types of services, many different groups that tend to be a little bit more siloed than we are on the design side. The challenge has really been a lot of in the way of education. And Keri, you kind of hit on this, like it's not a magic switch that you just come over here and you flip it and it's like, and it does all the AI and it's magic. It starts with explaining like APIs and why it's important to set those up and how that can turn into the conversation. But we need the bits of data to actually be organized in a way that it can be processed and then utilized, either by our natural language engine or it's put through our IVR. It's more of a voice experience. So it's been, the challenge has really been getting people to see that like, it's not magic for one, but two, that there is the potential to actually get there and like how they can do it. It's just going to be more of a step process. There isn't a little switch that we can turn on and the system, learns and just keeps going. It really requires a lot of monitoring on the part of several people to make sure that, but one, the experience is useful and pleasant to the people using it. But two, we're actually getting the feedback that we need to keep the system going, because it is kind of, at some point, it does become kind of a living thing and it needs to keep evaluating and keep growing in order for us to keep improving that experience.
Absolutely. I do have a follow-up question for you, Megan. I think it may fit in another question later, so I'm going to hold on to it. But anyone in the audience, don't hold on to your questions. You can put them out as soon as you think of them. We're going to pivot into kind of the more back into inspirational territory again. So what's something that you see in a voice AI or conversational AI that inspires you today?
Do you want me to take it, Megan? I'm like, I don't know which one you're. I was like, I don't want to overpower. Yeah, we can alternate. So I guess a couple of things for us. So our company was founded over 20 years ago about accessibility and education. And the two owners are still part of the company many years later. And one of them is blind, and one of them, his mother had cognitive disabilities from an accident. And their whole concept was, how do we allow content to be more accessible to people like that? And I think sometimes we think about accessibility as somebody that maybe has a disability, but I think it's beyond that. For myself, eye fatigue. I mean, there are times that I've now spoken to my boss, can we do walk and talks, which is now my new favorite thing, where we just have a meeting and we just talk on the phone and walk outside because we just get so tired. And so really thinking about the accessibility piece, I think, is important from the company and really inspiring. It's something that we continue to push out through everything we do. I also like to see, when I talk to organizations all over the world, that figure out, okay, how do we use conversational AI, whether that's chatbots or voice, to improve humanity. And there was somebody I spoke to recently in South Africa. He works for a government nonprofit, and their job is to help young adults in South Africa find work. It's very hard for them to find work after school. They don't have access to transportation or sometimes good internet. And so being able to have this kind of extended support is great. And so they've had real people at contact centers, but they also have chatbots that can answer questions late at night. And we've been talking about, well, how do we do this with voice? How do we expand that? And so whenever I kind of see how can we improve humanity as well, that's something that's really inspiring to me too.
Yeah, I don't know if I could pinpoint any one company, but it delighted my heart to hear the accessibility portion. Obviously, since we jumped into it earlier, I think that's a big driver. Like I said, for us, we primarily serve the military, and a lot of our folks have been active duty. A lot of those folks don't come back, perfectly fine. Like they have a range of impairments or disabilities. And it's a big part of why we create the experiences we create, to be able to reach everyone and to be more open to everyone. Because if you're like creating that better experience, that higher level, then it kind of can bring everybody in. I would say the companies that I've seen inspire me the most are the ones that are working into, to Keri's thought, working in that either not-for-profit space or that greater good space, because there's a lot of ways that where words are the interface for people, you can really help certain folks in certain situations where they're not having to deal with like heavy technological load, or, we in America have really been trained to like the desktop. That's not the case in many other areas of the world. The way they communicate is very different. And we're like, chat is the primary interface. So adapting conversational to those spaces to help people is really critical. And it's also like a really great way to make a difference there, is we're framing things around what is the easiest interface for folks across the globe, which is language, using the words instead of using something that they had to actually learn how to interact with.
Absolutely. We do have a question coming up, and excuse me, in the chat that I think ties in great to the next question. So I'm gonna actually ask Keri the question now. Monica's fascinated about how brands get translated into voice. Can you speak about your experience with that? What's the process to determine the right sound or tone for each brand?
So we are not a branding and marketing agency. So it's similar to, when somebody does a logo or they do a Sonic brand, which by the way, Megan, I know USAA just did their Sonic brand, beautifully done. And so it's the same thing. So generally an organization might work with a creative agency to say, okay, we want to do a voice, and maybe they do research and they do background. So once they have an idea of the style or what it is they want, our organization can help them find the right voice actor if they don't have one. So we can't tell you, what you think the brand should be. That would definitely have to be someone on your team. But we can then tell you, okay, what's going to make a great sounding voice? What is the type of quality that we're looking for? They have a certain script that they have to go through. So we have a very technical process that we go through to make sure that the quality is going to come out great. And we've had where people bring and say, okay, well, we want to have our CEO be the voice. And sometimes if that voice is maybe very raspy or it's not as clean, the words aren't as clear, we will be honest with them and say, the quality may not be as great. So it is important to make sure you do have a professional voice actor. They don't have to be a celebrity. Sometimes a celebrity can be more of a spokesperson, but it's really important to make sure you do work with a professional, whether you find them or we can help you find them, again, depending on once you have the basic understanding of, okay, what should my brand be, just like you would with your logo or a Sonic brand.
Awesome. And that leads me into the next question for both of you, which I'll tie in Inga's question after that. How does your team or your company stay up to date and working on the cutting edge in voice? What are some tools that have helped you and your team?
So we actually, it's kind of funny because USAA simultaneously moves quite slow, but also quite fast in different ways. And I'll explain that. We actually have a number of patents. So being at kind of the cutting edge, quote unquote, of technology and interactions is a big deal to us. If you have ever scanned your check to deposit into a banking app, that's actually a USAA patent. And we kind of stay on this cutting edge by having folks like our labs teams to kind of just experiment to see what can be built and done, while simultaneously we have our design teams kind of defining like what this should be, like what's the good lean in future for what this experience should be, how, what are the new pathways the IVR should follow. So if you've called into our IVR at all, you can maybe notice some differences. We're trying to improve pathways and language on that particular aspect, or things like chat. A lot of it is education. It's having a company that feels very strongly about supporting people learning. It's why we cover degrees. It's why certificates are a big deal to us. I think the culture of your workplace has to foster and support that to really keep people driving. Folks are passionate and they'll go out on their own, but it really doesn't hurt to also grow that like restlessness and that fire to constantly look for like, where's this thing going? Where are things trending? Like, what can I do with it? How can I adapt this? So it's very much ingrained in our culture. And I think it's kind of a key there to actually do that. It's one thing to be excited. I mean, this wasn't planned, but I happen to have it. I read a lot of books. I'm sure that looks familiar to a lot of people, but it's a lot. You got to reach out yourself, but it's also having that great circle and that great culture that supports just like learning and being passionate about new things.
Yeah, and I wonder if you have any advice for folks who maybe not work in a culture, may not work in a company that has a desire to learn or fosters that culture of learning. I'm not sure if either of you have experience kind of advocating change in that way.
You can find your space, and I'm sure Keri can add to this too, because she actually she's a very connected person. I will say that. There are groups and collectives. So specifically, there's one called the Conversational Collective, which actually started out in Austin, but it's now, thanks to, pandemic, I guess it's now global. So that is a group where it's equally passionate people that are interested in kind of this particular space. But if you are passionate about something else, there are those groups out there. There's art communities. Yeah, I would say if your company is not quite supportive, or you're not getting kind of what you need, search out one of those circles, because they're typically full of people that are equally excited and full of people that are also willing to share and like let you learn as they learn from you.
Yeah, I would add to that, just to give you guys a personal example. So the current role that I have at ReadSpeaker AI, they had saw the work I was doing and say, we love what you're doing, come do that for us. So I think it's a lot of times, putting out content and just, whatever, I'm a branding marketing person, but whatever way that you do, like getting yourself out there, sharing it from a personal standpoint is important. I also have a slightly different approach in that sometimes I think it's good to be around people completely different than you. Sometimes if you're always in the same room with people doing the same work, you have the same conversation. So I encourage people, go talk to somebody who's an industrial engineer, go talk to someone who is a music teacher, go talk to different people and have conversations and say, I'm thinking about this, or have you thought about that? Or what do you do? And it starts to kind of spark new ideas and kind of out of the box thinking. So as much as it's important to be in a space where people are the same, it's also really important to get different opinions of thought, different, again, very much on diversity and inclusion. So different backgrounds, different ages. Kids are very smart. So sometimes asking, a 13-year-old, how do they use voice? What are they doing? Can give you some new insight. So I think that's important as well.
Awesome. I think as we were kind of talking about work still, someone asked Keri, they're interested to hear your thoughts on synthetic AI voices. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things, right? There's always a fear when something new comes in. I think, Maddie, you mentioned it earlier, this idea of, is AI going to replace us? And I don't think about it that way. Again, first of all, sometimes when you hear people talk, it sounds like, all this stuff is happening. It's not. There's a lot of human stuff that has to go on to make things happen. What I think about synthetic voices is it's about scaling something. So if I'm a voice actor, it doesn't mean your job goes away. There are still elements where you need that specific creative thing for a commercial, for an event, for an experience, that you need something that is real and human. But what if you could kind of expand that and scale that to an IVR, to ads, to other things? And then there's still potential compensation based off of that. So it's really about kind of scaling that. But I also think about synthetic voice sometimes about replacing the things we don't want to do. So, talking to a customer contact center, how many times do they have to answer the question, what's your password, or the same 25 questions? Nobody wants to do that. We go insane. So that would be a great option for a conversational AI with a synthetic voice that can still be caring, can still be a great experience, but then guide you to the right person for a more complex discussion or issue. So I think that's the first thing. I'm sure on a lot of people's minds is, of course, the Anthony Bourdain thing that came out. I think from a technical standpoint, it's really exciting to see how far the technology has come, how lifelike it sounds. On the other hand, just to be clear, ReadSpeaker was not a part of that in any way, but we really do our due diligence. We work B2B. We make sure that we have the legal contracts in place. So whether you are a voice agency, you are a talent agency, you are a brand or a voice actor, it's really important to have a legal team, to have a lawyer, to be thinking about how is my voice going to be used now and into the future, and to be able to negotiate those terms. So for us, our contract is really about, we've just been given permission to create it. But in terms of where it's distributed, how it's used, that goes with the brand and the voice actor, and that's the actual contract that they have. So really important to make sure, just like you would if you were, when Instagram came out with photography, with podcasting, with music, it's that same thing we're seeing from a creative standpoint. Have a legal team in place and really be thinking about synthetic voice as a way to scale, to be doing more, but it doesn't replace the creative piece that you do initially.
Making a lot of sense, Keri. You're making a lot of sense, unsurprisingly. I'm gonna just pivot into a different question a little bit gracelessly. But Megan, Monica wanted to know, as someone whose first language is not English, they find that in 2021 they still struggle to communicate with chatbots, with grammar issues, etc. Does USAA use past customer chat logs to improve the voice tools you use, and what is that process like?
So we do collect all that data. We collect the data from our phone line. So if you're calling into our IVR system, we collect the data and conversations. If you're talking to one of our live agents actually in chat, or if you're talking to our virtual assistant. And it is like an ongoing thing of how do we measure quote unquote success on those interactions. A long time ago, success used to be that we just gave you a link and sent you somewhere and it was like, good, we're good. Now the idea of success has changed and we're trying to reframe those conversations. So we're answering your questions within the chat or allowing you to be successful like within that space, which means that you have to understand you and you have to understand the system to a certain extent to be successful. So multilingual, even regional, can add a challenge to the conversational space. And it's something that like, this is one of those areas where I feel very much like a little industry baby, in that we're very slowly moving in that direction, but there's a lot of nuance and slang and accentuation to different parts of a word, depending on where you're from or who you are, or even how you're feeling that day. And it can affect how the system reads you. So a lot of that is building up the framework of the system now, so it does a better job of understanding you as it grows. And we're still building that framework. It is really tough. I will say an advantage is having multilingual folks on your conversational team. And specifically, not just because it's a huge advantage, but also because someone who maybe if English isn't their primary language, they're actually processing words differently, actually kind of thinking of things in two separate languages. And they're almost seeing the structure and then that quote unquote interface behind the sentences. And they're a little bit more apt to drop some of that nuance. You know, if you're a native language native speaker, you tend to talk with a lot of nuance, just like we talk with a lot of body language and all of that. So they have the ability to typically kind of drop some of that and start restructuring the conversation in a way where it's at least going to be clear to more folks. But yeah, it's an ongoing process. The struggle is real. We do look at the conversations. I get everything from, you know, this was great and feedback to, we had somebody like curse our chatbot out, which is totally fair. It just happens sometimes. So we do see that. But you know, if you have other feedback as well, like if you type it in there, I will probably see it. You can direct it right to me. I don't do that. Our legal team will have a heart attack, but we do collect a lot of that data. It is very important for us to start being more intelligent about our approach to, you know, conversational. You can't be more human-like if you're not understanding the person that you're interacting with.
Absolutely. And I think this ties into the next question, which is how do you manage the push and pull between practicalities and idealism? So, I mean, that's a huge question. So I can kind of focus it down to, I mean, what has been your North Star personally or on your team as you navigate the push and pull of practical and idealistic?
I think for us, our North Star is creating that human-like kind of unified voice for USAA. If you go to a lot of our experience, the voice is slightly different, or it is very clearly different. And with how most of our channels aren't just interacted with in one way, the big driver is unifying that experience. So when somebody it doesn't matter where they're coming in, it can even be content on page, but they understand they're reading it in the same consistent voice, because that's really how you build that trusting relationship. Like if we want somebody to use our chat and we haven't really proved ourselves, they're not going to be very likely to interact or continue interacting. It's about us being consistent in that experience and that voice, and then they'll go, okay, I'll try it again, and you know, helping them be successful. So that's a big thing. We've also developed a series of kind of guiding principles, which I would really genuinely recommend for anyone trying to work in the conversational space. If you're a company trying to develop that brand and that tone and that voice, the guiding principles are really stating not only what you are, but what you aren't. And there's a lot of what we don't want to be. So we make that very clear with those principles and that language. And again, accessibility is definitely a big part of that. The universality for our members is a big deal, and it's part of those guiding principles. So I think that's kind of how we narrow. It definitely takes a lot of work because it's a big company, it's a big industry. So it takes a lot of us circling back sometimes to revisit our why and the drivers. But you know, eventually we get everybody on the same page, and then we keep moving.
Awesome. And I think for Keri, I want to ask you, as you consider the future of voice and AI, what are you most excited about?
I think, you know, just to kind of couple off of Megan's a little bit, again, this idea of accessibility and, you know, really when I think about human beings as a whole, we all want to be understood, and voice is an extension of that. And so it's how do we have more people feel understood in the moment that they're interacting with a conversational AI? And so that to me is kind of what accessibility is about. For us on our team, we have so many people on our research team, research scientists, linguists, native speakers that really do their due diligence. They're some of my favorite people, most interesting people to talk to on our team, because they're looking at human language and how do we translate that into the technical piece, and really look at that. So I think, you know, we are continuing to work on it. That's part of our North Star, is that accessibility piece for every language that we do. We have close to 50 languages at this point. And so I think that's exciting for me. You know, if there's more people that can feel understood, whether it's by a human being or a voice bot, I think that that's a huge plus for our world as a whole.
Love it. Love it. And I'm looking at the time we have left, wondering if making sure I'm not missing any questions from it. Oh, great. I'm glad I opened the chat. So Kirti is asking how to train the system without reading the chats or the conversation, as most of the people are pretty reluctant to share or comfortable with their audio or conversation being read. So if the enterprise wants the system to be perfect, but if people aren't really comfortable sharing the data or the conversation, How to train, so how to train, is there a way to train the system without reading the chats? Is that the question, Kirti?
That sounds like what it is. So you do, to train a system, you do start with kind of initial baseline, and these are your like assumed verbiages, your assumed grammars. That's kind of where you start. You do, again, it's got to go out in the world at some point because language is so open. People are going to say stuff that you would never, ever have predicted, but a good starting point is to set up that baseline of what you think people will say and how they interact. And then even if you can't put it out in the world to quote unquote test it right away, you can do some internal testing, doing like a table read, or just interfacing maybe some qualitative sessions with some folks that are representative of your consumer base and kind of, again, hear how they're going to interact and what they're going to say. And that'll at least get you, like, that'll get you started. But yeah, once it goes out in the world, it still is very unpredictable. I do know that, like, not everybody's comfortable, but if you can set up some of those qualitative testings, those people are there and that actually want to give you their thoughts on the experience. So you should get some good information out of that.
That's actually a really great insight on that. But the current roadblocker that we are facing, so the approach that you have shared, we have picked up. So every industry, so English is a little, you can say, funny language. It might mean something in one sector, and other sector, the word completely changed its meaning. So when you're training it for a particular sector, you can pick up a certain sort of data sets and train it and do all the information there. But still there, if you're building it up for an enterprise, they prefer to have everything to be according to them and have a certain sets and expecting the complete proper solutions. There are very less of enterprises who are ready for error testing and trying to test that. But the roadblocker that we are mostly facing right now is mostly on the part of when they come up with a conversation or they're trying to talk. So two challenges, one is ASR and the NLP. So on NLP, we keep on picking up the data. We have to still create a database where they are constantly saying, but transcripts, or you can see the transcript is recorded after the wake word. So we can train it, but sometimes they're reluctant to even share that. So those kind of challenges are a roadblocker that we are facing. I wanted an insight from your experiences that you would have built up on a system.
Trust is always really tricky. So there's not a good answer. That's a really great question. I feel like we could have an entirely separate talk on it, to be honest. So please make a mental note of that. Like if folks don't feel comfortable, it's almost like you've seen kind of that wave diagram of like people adopting. And we see this a lot through security measures, even things like biometrics. And that's not even conversational, but level of comfort with some of these technologies aren't there until folks start seeing them used more in the public space. So that's the thing. So it's like, it's very hard for us to control because the tipping point is people have to start seeing it more in the world to then go, okay, I actually think this is a thing, which is unfortunate. So it's like, it's this weird waiting period of like, well, will people start to feel, more affinity towards this product as everybody makes a chatbot? They might hate it more if all the chatbots are bad. But yeah, that's an extraordinarily difficult, a good question, but a very difficult one because there is, it's still, even though it's conversational, it's kind of meant to be more natural. There's still the technological barrier and people's discomfort with something that is considered a new technology, new technological experience. And they typically won't go for it unless somebody somebody that they trust in their life is like an active user, or that they're seeing more prevalence of that particular technology in the world.
And I just want to add to that, Megan, that's why we need more marketing people in this space, because I'm telling you, if you talk to anyone outside this space and I tell them what I do and they're like, wait, what is it? They know very little. So there needs to be more people really talking about what's working, what's happening. So if you are a branding or marketing person, there is definitely a space for you here. And I think we're going to see more of that coming soon.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So we can kind of say that it's an exponential growth and still space for people to learn and get comfortable. After that, we will be able to. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
awesome question, Kirti. And that takes us right to the end of, we're out of time, everyone, but thank you so much for engaging. I've listed the ways we can engage with Keri and Megan. Add them, follow them on Twitter and LinkedIn. Do you have any closing words or anything you'd like to plug at the end, ladies?
No, I mean, just thank you. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer or connect you with someone if I don't know the answer. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and happy to chat more.
Exactly the same. It's one of the things I love about this community is it's not gurus, it's everyone is very open about sharing and learning because it is such a new space. So, feel free to reach out to us, and I will definitely probably connect you to other people that I know are way better than I am in this space. But yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you both for such an amazing session. This recording will be added to the Whova. You can rewatch it later. Everyone have a great day, and thanks again for coming.